always got the vibe, got the vibe.
Hey guys, welcome back to the poker vlog. Today we're gonna go over a session I played last night at Hustler Casino. Originally, I wasn't planning on making a vlog from my session last night, but I played a few interesting hands that I figured you guys might enjoy on this channel. So that's what today's gonna be about. Before we get into the poker, however, I wanted to let y'all know that I'm going back to Austin, Texas, back to the Lodge live stream. I'm planning on releasing this video on Saturday morning, and I'll be playing on the Lodge live stream on Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon. Both are gonna be big games. So if you happen to catch this video right when it releases or even the following day, tune into the Lodge live to watch the action live as it unfolds. If you missed that, no problem. I'm gonna go over all those interesting hands from Texas in the following video. But for now, Hustler Casino Live 25, 50, 100. Let's get into it. All right, guys, here we go once again at Hustler. Playing 25-50 tonight, but the $100 straddle was on most of the time, including this hand. Zio opens up to 300. Dylan calls on the button, and I look down at Queen Jack offsuit in the big blind. Having some removal to strong hands, and considering that Zio raised from late position, and Dylan just called on the button, I think we could get away with some pre-flop aggression here, even though my hand is not great. So I decided to go for it. I make it 1800 to go. Zio does get out of the way, but Dylan calls again on the button. I'm more than okay with this since Dylan probably doesn't have too strong of a hand since he just called twice pre-flop. So when we go to a flop of King 5-2, I see no reason to slow down. This time I put in 1300 bucks and Dylan makes the call. Now, when he makes the call, I think, of course, we're probably behind, but he's going to have tons of hands that are going to fold to a turn bet, including any 5, any middling pocket pair, maybe a hand like ace-deuce suited. So when the turn comes to 6 of hearts, I decide to continue applying pressure. This time, I bet $5,000, around 2/3 the size of the pot, trying to set up a similar size shove on the river. This is what I would do if I had a strong hand, so I figured with queen high it makes some sense. But sadly, Dylan calls once more. And at this point, it becomes apparent to me that he probably doesn't have one of those hands I mentioned on the turn trying to fold out. Instead, he's likely got a king or maybe even a set. So when the river comes a queen of diamonds, even though we make second pair, I don't want to bluff and I don't want to value bet. So I just check and give up. And now Dylan puts in a bet of $6,000. A little bit interesting because if he had a king, I would expect him to check it back. Say a hand like King Jack or King 10 suited, for example. So this bet does spike my curiosity a little bit. He could have a hand that turned a straight draw or turned a flush draw and now decides to bluff on the river, but it seems pretty unlikely. So in the end, I end up folding, and luckily we avoid some extra pain as Dylan flopped himself a set. Nice hand. In the next one, I open up the action to $200 with 5-4 suited. Mike X re-raises on my left to 1,000, gets back around to me, and I think it's worth noting, suited connectors are generally overrated, in my opinion, especially out of position. But that said, I do want to give some action here in a game like this, especially against a guy like this. I mean, look at those sunglasses, look at this hair. How can I not make the call? So I do toss in the 1,000 and we go to a flop of 9-6 deuce with 1 club. So we've got a straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. I check it and now Mike X bets $800. Against a small size on a board like this, I think our hand benefits greatly from a check raise, which I think is best most of the time, but just calling also has some merit. This time I decide to just call and see what happens on the turn, and I instantly regret not check raising because we drill the straight. It's the 3 of diamonds. Granted, it does put a potential flush on the board, but he re-raised pre-flop, so he's not going to have a ton of suited hands, and even if he did, only 25% of those suited hands should be the diamond variety, right? So yeah, it seems unlikely to me. Plus, it's a good card for me in general. I decided to lead for that reason, $1,100 into the middle, and we get some overkill on the river. It's the 3 of hearts. Not my favorite card, of course, as now the board is paired, so we also lose to a hand like pocket nines, say. But of course, my hand is still way too strong to not put money in, so I throw in $1,400. And now Mike thinks for a bit before raising. Not a fun spot whatsoever, but he could be bluffing with a hand like ace king with the diamond or ace queen with the diamond. Might even be raising an overpair for some thin value, considering that I bet really small on this river. But of course, when I make the call, we get the bad news that he's got ace king of diamonds. Kind of a cooler, but if I'm being honest, I could have been a little bit more disciplined on this river, because once I bet and he raises, there's not a whole lot of hands that might play that way that I could expect to be, even with a hand as strong as a straight. But then again, it was a small size, so I didn't have to be right too often. Well played by Mike, and once more, we give money to that guy. Moving on to the next hand, which in my opinion is the hand of the night. In this one, the straddle is on. Dylan opens up the action to 300, and I look down at 6-3 suited on the button. Probably too weak to call. Definitely too weak to re-raise, but you guys can probably guess. If it's in the vlog, I did one of those two things. That's right, this time I decided to raise. I make it $1,000 to go, trying to take advantage of my position and the fact that maybe Dylan might not have the best hand. But of course, I am dead wrong, as Dylan has got himself pocket aces, and he makes that known pretty quickly when raising up to 4,000. Well, of course, I don't know he has aces, but what I mean is he's letting me know he's got something pretty damn good. So what do we do with that information? Well, I've got 6 high and just a terrible hand, so of course folding seems rational. But because we can assume that Dylan has a super strong hand, if we make the call and get lucky on this flop, we could potentially win a lot of money if he does have a hand exactly like the one he's got here, or pocket kings, for example. So I decide to gamble and make the call. Maybe we hit something on a flop. Let's see. Flop comes down, 4-3-2. With a couple of clubs. That means I've got a pair and a flush draw, and that is exactly the kind of board I was looking for. Dylan bets 2,000, and now we have a decision between raising right away or just calling. And in my opinion, calling makes the most sense for a variety of reasons, mainly that there was a bunch of raising pre-flop, so I'm not going to be re-raising too many flops against Dylan given the pre-flop action. Secondly, our hand is in great shape against ace-king, ace-queen, and even overpairs, so I don't really see a whole lot of reason to try to protect or anything like that. With that in mind, I make the call, and we see a dream on the turn. It's the 3 of hearts. Almost never will I have a 3, and of course it doesn't bring in the flush, so it shouldn't scare Dylan if he's got an overpair, and sure enough, he does put in another bet of $6,000. Back to me now with 3 of a kind, the straight draw, and the flush draw. What do we want to do? Generally, I think just calling is the best play again here, just like on the flop. But what I don't want to have happen is we hit a flush on the river, or maybe a 5 comes, maybe even an ace. You know, these sorts of hands that might scare him if he's got a big pocket pair. Now, of course, an ace would have given him the winning hand, but I'm just telling you guys my thoughts since I wasn't sure exactly which overpair Dylan probably had. So for those reasons, I elect to just jam all in right now. Maybe it'll look like a bluff, and of course we can avoid Dylan check folding on the river if we make a flush. So I do raise all in for his $21,000. Dylan thinks for a bit and is not convinced. He makes the call, and that's good news for me. I let him know we've got a 3. We decide to run it twice, but as you guys can see, he's in pretty bad shape with pocket aces on this board. And sure enough, we do end up holding on both river cards. So we take down this nearly $55,000 pot, getting us out of the deficit and into Profitville. Not my proudest hand by any means, but more than happy with the result. In this next one, I open up the action to 300 on the button with Queen 6 suited and get called by Mike X and Henry in the blinds. So 3 ways to a flop, and it looks like this momentum is picking up. It comes 6-6-3. That means I've got 3 of a kind with a great kicker. Action checks around to me, and I would be betting a ton of hands on a ton of boards. This is no exception. I put in $300. Mike X makes the call, and Henry gets out of the way, so I think he's probably got a straight draw or some sort of pocket pair. Turn cards is 7, and, well, we're probably not getting value from a pocket pair again, especially if it's smaller than the 7, and, of course, 5-4, which is the obvious straight draw, is now completed. So I decide to get a little deceptive in pot control, check this one back. but we get a good river card. It's the 3 of clubs, giving me a full house. That's a pretty good hand. So when Mike X leads out for 1,000, I'm going to try to get some value from whatever he's got. Hopefully he's not bluffing. So I throw in a raise to 3,500, and Mike X quickly makes the call. When he calls that quickly, it looks like we're probably not going to win this one. And sure enough, he's got a 6 himself. So yeah, what looked like a great situation ends up being a somewhat unfortunate one, since we had him in terrible shape with our queen kicker versus his 4 kicker, as we both flopped 3 of a kind, but we end up chopping this one up. Hard to complain really after the 6-3 hand. So I guess we shall just move on to the next one. Here I open up the button to 200 with Queen Jack suited and get called by suited Superman as well as Mike X. So we are going to go 3 ways to a flop once again. And this time we have 2 overcards, a straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw. Looking pretty damn good. So when it checks to me, I put in 200. Suited Superman makes the call. Mike X gets out of the way. Turn card is Gin. We haven't hit this many hands in a while, but I am more than happy with it. We've got the nuts on a very connected board, so for that reason, when Suited Superman checks, I decide to put in the overbet. I make it $1,800 to go. We don't have any removal to top pair, 2 pair, smaller straights, etc. And of course, we've got the best possible hand, so why not throw in a bunch of chips? $1,800 is the price. Suited Superman has turned himself 2nd pair, and it seems he's got some trust issues because he does not let go of that hand. He makes the call, going to a river, which I'm hoping is a brick, but it's not. It's the Queen of Hearts, similar to the last hand. A great situation ends up being not so great. Of course, it's not like I expect to lose this hand or really even chop it too often, but it's just the fact that now it's going to be harder to get value from whatever he's got because, of course, any jack now makes a straight. But I'm still going to try. So when he checks, I throw in a bet around 2/3 the size of the pot. $3,200, and Superman does not love it. He's got 3rd pair with the best possible kicker. That is what you call a bluff catcher. But am I bluffing? That is the question he is trying to answer. Turns out I'm not. He makes the fold, and I let him know it was a good fold by showing him my cards. Suited Superman, good guy. When he asks to see your hand, you kind of just got to show it. So yeah, we don't get a ton of value, but still nice to make the nut straight. A few rounds later, this hand comes up where Greg raises it up to 300, and I am next to act with the number 1 starting hand, pocket aces. Always a welcome sight when a session is going well. Actually, any time, but especially when a session is going well. I raise it up to 1,000, gets back around to Greg, and he makes the call with Queen 10 suited. Off to a flop, which comes great, as it often does when you have pocket aces. King 9 deuce, rainbow, gonna be good for me in all types of ways, and especially this time since I've got an overpair. He checks, I bet half pot, $1,100, and now he makes the call. That looks good to me. Maybe he's got himself a king, let's say a hand like King Queen or King Jack, maybe even Queen Jack suited or Queen 10 suited, these sorts of straight draw hands. So when the turn comes to Jack of Diamonds, I am not loving it necessarily, but I think continuing to bet is probably the best play. More often than not, we can continue to get value from a king or, hands that we're ahead of since we've got the best pair on the board. But for whatever reason, after Greg checks, something just felt a little bit off. I guess that white magic, that's kind of tough to describe. But something just felt a little off, so I decided to check it back. Kind of a nitty check back, if I'm being honest. I sort of wish I continued betting, but I check it back. River is the 9 of spades, pairing the board. Now if he called on the flop with any 9, we now lose, but then if he's got King Jack, we are now ahead. So mixed feelings about this card. Greg now leads out for a pot-sized bet, $4,500. And after playing my hand this way, I don't see how I could do anything besides calling. So that's what I do. And he turns over the bad news, Queen 10 suited for the turned straight. I guess we could have lost more, but he still gets a nice value bet on the river. Ace is cracked. I guess that's justice after cracking Dylan's aces earlier on. Tough one. This upcoming hand is definitely an odd one. I open up the action to 400 over a limp and get a few callers before flopping top 2 with Queen Jack. It's Queen Jack 3 with a flush draw out there. Greg checks, I bet 400, and now Henry raises to 1,400. Greg folds, and of course I come along with top 2. Could consider putting in another raise on the flop, not something you see too often, but this time I keep it standard and just call. Turn card is the 3 of spades. Looks good to me. It makes pocket 3s a little less likely. I guess the only hand that is of some concern now is like ace 3 of diamonds, let's say, but for the most part, this card looks good to me. So I check again, and now Henry bets $2,300. Decision time. This is the problem with having tough hands out of position. You want to build a pot, but you don't always want to scare off your opponent. That said, we could have a variety of bluffs on a board like this. Let's say a hand like ace jack with the ace of diamonds, or king 10 of diamonds, these sorts of semi-bluffs that don't want to call out of position with no showdown value. So I think with top 2, we can mix in some raises as well. We also have no removal to hands that he might be drawing with, like flush draws and straight draws, so I'd like to get some value from those as well. I make it $9,000 to go, and now Henry starts thinking. Of course, I had no idea, but he's got the same hand I do. What are the chances we both flop top 2 with queen jack, huh? But anyway, as Henry is thinking about it, I am developing a plan for the river. What am I going to do if it's a brick? What am I going to do if the flush gets there? And I think the play, if the flush does get there, is to put in a check raise and turn my hand into a bluff, trying to represent a full house. I guess that's what I'll do if a straight or a flush comes in, but what am I going to do if it's a complete brick? I might actually check my hand and give Henry some rope. But all those thoughts amount to nothing because Henry just ends up folding. A pretty tight fold from him, but I guess he was afraid that I had a better hand than him. Turns out we had the same one, so all in all, this is a great result for me. And with that, we move to this next hand where, once again, we are going to be battling against King Henry. In this one, I raise it up to 300 with ace king from late position and get a call from Henry in the straddle. Heads up to a flop of jack 9 deuce with a flush draw. I've got the ace of spades and 2 overs, plus it's a single raised pot, so I'm going to be c-betting pretty often. He checks, I put in a bet, and he makes the call. Turn card looks okay. It's the jack of clubs. He checks, and now I think it's fine to mix between checking back or continuing to bet. Without a spade, I'd probably check back, but having the ace of spades I think is a good card to bet with. So I make it 500, and now Henry check raises to $2,000. Not really sure what's up with this. He's only representing a jack, and let's be honest, making 3 of a kind is pretty tough. So I make the call. I know Henry's capable of having all sorts of bluffs, so we are going to a river, which is an interesting one. It's the king of clubs giving me top pair. It does bring in queen 10 though, which is the most obvious straight draw on the flop and turn, but aside from that, king of clubs is pretty much a brick. And even though we improved to top pair, I think our hand strength doesn't really matter because we were either significantly ahead on the turn or already in trouble on the turn. So when he bets $4,300, I make the call right away, still beating any bluff he might have. And sure enough, he does have one of those, this time with a missed straight draw. We're going to win this $14,000 pot. And with that, we move to the last interesting hand of the night. In this one, Dylan raises to 300. Greg makes the call a few players to his left, and I look down at 9-7 offsuit in late position. And similar to earlier when I checked back with aces on the turn versus Greg, my spider senses in this instance are telling me that we are going to win this pot. For whatever reason, I was feeling adventurous, so I raise it up to $1,300. Pretty much just banking on the fact that Dylan doesn't have a super strong hand, and we can take down some dead money since Greg just flatted. But it turns out both players make the call, so we are going to go 3 ways to a flop of ace-king deuce with 2 diamonds. They both check, and of course, continuing to bet on an ace-high board after being the pre-flop re-raiser has tons of merit, but I think occasionally checking back an ace would be something I do, so I decided to do it this time as well with 9 high. Not giving up by any means, but just delaying the aggression a little bit. Dylan checks again on the turn, which is the jack of diamonds. Greg also checks, and now, of course, it's time to strike. We do have a diamond, but that's about it. Gonna have to just rely on the fact that I re-raised pre-flop, so I could have all sorts of stuff on this board. And I'm hoping these guys acknowledge that. So I throw in a bet of 1,300, and luckily we're able to get Dylan to fold a jack, which is a great win for us. Greg also folds his straight draw, and just like that, we take down a pot with 9 high and earn ourselves a button because we were playing the stand-up game. I guess I should have mentioned that too, pre-flop when going crazy with 9-7 offsuit. It's always nice to win a button, you know? But yeah, that was the last interesting hand of the night. Not the wildest session I've ever played, but I thought there were a few interesting spots for sure. So as always, I hope you all enjoyed the hands. right, so as you guys saw, that was an interesting turn of events. I played some hands rather poorly. I played some a little bit better. And in the end, I'm happy to report that we came out on top. Ended up winning around $25,000 or so. I think a little bit less, but either way, still a great result and one that I'm happy to try to parlay into some more wins at the lodge this weekend. Like I said at the start of this video, heading to Texas tomorrow morning from LAX, which is somewhere over here. You guys can't see it, but trust me, it's there. Gonna hop on a plane, go to Texas, and gamble with those guys. It's definitely a different vibe on the Lodge Live versus Hustler, so I'll do my best to adjust. Either way, I'll report those results in the following vlog, so stay tuned for that one. If you enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up. Joey and I really appreciate it. Joey is my editor. He puts a bunch of work into these videos, so if not for me, then at least for him. That's all I got for you guys today. As always, thanks for the support, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.